Hey everybody, welcome to the Deposition. I'm attorney Andrew Thomas, joined today by senior attorney Nathan Lewis.
How's it going?
So we're going to be going over a few different topics today. So obviously a lot of things are happening in the news and immigration particularly. I want to start with the case of the man who was recently, along with a lot of people, deported to El Salvador and is currently confined there. And there's been a lot of talk about this was done accidentally, this was done even wrongfully by the U.S. government. So I want to talk about his situation, but I think we should also talk a little bit more about details in there and how it applies to a wider audience, because I think that the news has some things right, like normal, but a lot more things wrong than right.
Well, they're going to miss, of course, the kind of nuance of how withholding or removal and the immigration court process works. So I think the government has pretty much admitted it was an accident, but there's a difference between accidentally and wrongfully too. So that's kind of with this individual was from El Salvador. I think, in fact, during one of his immigration court hearings, the judge pretty much said, "Yeah, I think you're a member of MS-13." He somehow still got what's called withholding of removal. Withholding is not asylum. It's with withholding case, you have an order of deportation existing. They just can't deport you back to your home country unless certain things happen. They could have deported him to a safe third country at any time. And if country conditions have changed in your home country, they can then deport you back to your home country. Hard to argue that country conditions in El Salvador have not changed since he got his grant of withholding. But they still would have had gone through a process to deport him back there in a normal way.
Yeah, I think a couple of the key points that you're pointing out there is, so this individual, he was granted something called withholding of removal, right? Mm-hmm. And that is sort of a form of relief in immigration court that is on the same application as an asylum, which is the I-589. So it's on there. It's a lesser form. The standard's a little higher.
Right.
And so ultimately, if you are granted withholding of removal, it doesn't mean that you were not ordered removed. In fact, the opposite. You were ordered removed, but your removal is literally being withheld. They're not executing that order of removal for some reason. So in the case of this individual, or a lot of people who came from El Salvador, things have changed quite a bit in that country, especially since I first started practicing, and you too. I mean, we've been doing this the same amount of time. So El Salvador has changed from the murder capital of the world, inarguably, even as early as 5 years ago, to now one of the safer countries in the world, murder rate being quite a bit lower. I don't have the numbers on that, but
I think the official numbers are lower than some U.S. cities.
So probably the thinking or the argument from the government side here is that whatever conditions existed for this individual to get granted the withholding of removal, where he has the removal order, they're just not executing it. Well, those conditions have now changed.
Right.
However, in this case, it does appear to have been an accident.
It was definitely an accident, and the government pretty much admitted as much. However, they're claiming that this individual was on a list to be deported at some point, just not with that first kind of flight to El Salvador.
That first wave.
So that first wave, because those were based on basically an anti-terrorism law that from passed a long time ago, and that didn't really apply to this individual.
So I want to kind of talk a little bit about temporary protected status, particularly when it comes to Venezuela, because obviously been in the news quite a bit. We know the Trump administration has been trying to end a lot of these programs. It's being thwarted.
With in particular Venezuela, because there are two TPS designations for Venezuela. There's one that was set to expire in April, and I believe there's another one set to expire this September. People forget that TPS literally stands for temporary protected status. It is generally in the purview of the executive branch, aka the president, to designate or not designate a country. What has happened with the TPS designation set to expire in April is that a district court judge out of California, the Ninth Circuit, has ruled that basically Trump has to allow individuals that already have TPS continue to have TPS. Now, what that means is if you're from Venezuela and you have and you already have TPS, this does not apply to people who want to apply for TPS or who are in the process of applying for TPS. Your status is still going to continue as holding TPS. This is by no means the end of this fight.
As we know, these are always back and forth battles. This is basically the lowest level judge in the federal court system making this ruling. And like I said, typically this is entirely up to the executive branch to decide which country gets TPS. This is not really a legislative issue. It's not a judicial issue. It's the president and then his cabinet can decide this. So in our practice, we obviously deal with a lot of immigration court, individuals coming to us
every day
seeking representation in Executive Office of Immigration Review under the threat of being deported.
Right.
I think that there's a lot of misconceptions out there. And I only know this because not necessarily who I talk to here in the office, they seem to get it, but it's in the news. You see it when people aren't used to delving in this practice area every day like we do. They try to dip their toe in the water and then want to come up with something. What I've seen a lot of confusion on are particularly when we talk about individuals facing the threat of deportation that have a green card, that are permanent residents, that maybe are here on a visa. You've seen a lot of stories out there, someone on a student visa now under the threat of deportation.
Right.
I've seen a headline recently, even green card holders, quote, caught up in deportation rates.
Yeah.
And I want to go into that a little bit because there's definitely misconceptions out there. The big one being, and then I'll let you run with it, but the big one being anything short of being a U.S. citizen, you are subject to immigration laws of the United States, and you can absolutely face deportation if certain things happen.
Of course. So first off, there are, in general, two classifications of visas. There's non-immigrant. That's going to be like you said, your student visa, your visitor visa, your employment visa. And then there is an immigrant visa, which is basically you have a green card, your permanent residency. For non-immigrant visas, like the entire point of the visa is you don't stay here. So that's easy to revoke for the government, easy to send you back to home country. It's not really a deportation issue so much as like you just don't have a visa anymore. With a green card, an immigrant visa, you are still subject to deportation. Like the government can take action to revoke that immigrant visa and send you back to your home country. Typically, this is due to you have committed some criminal action that makes you ineligible to be a resident of the United States. If you get busted with a whole bunch of drugs, like they're gonna send you back to your home country. Also, if the government suspects that you were fraudulent in how you obtained your green card, they'll also put you in deportation proceedings to strip you of that green card and deport you. So just because you have a green card, that does not mean you are protected from deportation. It is a lot harder to do, but it's still possible. So
we represent and have represented several individuals who have a green card who find themselves in immigration court because they had an indiscretion. Maybe they got a DUI. Maybe they got maybe there's some kind of family violence or something out there that they got these criminal charges, and then all of a sudden ICE comes calling, get that notice to appear in immigration court. So when we come in, our job is to, assess the totality of the situation. We look at their whole life, and, just because of one indiscretion, if someone has a good background, good history in this country, what they call equities to the United States, ties here.
Right.
You know, United States citizen family, maybe children, maybe spouse, good background, good worker, maybe go to church. There's a lot of things we can do to help people like that, but it is a fight.
Yeah.
And I'd rather they don't face that, but it's a reality of the situation. You know, you're not home free just because you have that residency. So you still have to keep your nose clean.
Right. So you got to fight it a lot. And we have also a lot of clients that people understand that if you get a green card through a marriage-based process, a lot of times those aren't permanent green cards. They're conditional. So you have 2 years to file additional paperwork to make your residency permanent. And a lot of people get placed in immigration court because they fail to file that paperwork. And now they got to go through the entire process all over again. But this time in court, where a judge is trying to send you out of the country.
Or maybe that marriage splits up in those 2 years and they can't show that they're still together, which you can still technically be granted permanent residency.
Right.
But more likely you're going to get pulled for an interview and higher chance of denial, which could lead to immigration court, especially under this administration.
I mean, basically the moral of the story is if you have a green card, do your best to naturalize, and then you don't have to worry about it.
Absolutely.
So learn English, because that's a requirement for almost all naturalization processes. And
stay out of jail.
Stay out of jail. Well, that's just general life advice.
Stay out of jail, kids.
Yeah, stay out of jail. But the only protection from deportation is being a U.S. citizen.
$5 million. For $5 million, this could be yours. That was the first of the cards. You know what that card is?
Gold card.
It's the gold card. The Trump card, gold card.
So do you have a gold card in your wallet?
I do not.
So have you been following this story a little bit?
Some.
The reason why I say follow, I mean, obviously you're an immigration attorney. I am. We're charged with understanding the laws.
Yeah.
The reason why I joke a little bit about is this has been clouded in mystery since it was announced. You know, President Trump and Howard Lutnick sort of announced this program called a gold card. A lot of people have referred it to like a green card on steroids. However, we haven't got a lot of details. We do know that their idea is to sell these for about $5 million a pop. They're claiming this will help reduce the national deficit. We don't know if this is going to be a straight $5 million payment to the government or a $5 million investment into industry. We do know that they intended this to replace the EB-5 investor visa, where generally a person had to invest up to $1 million in targeted businesses in the U.S. and then maintain a certain number of full-time jobs for U.S. citizens. They're intending this to replace that. They announced this almost 2 months ago now, and Howard Lutnick said that this was going to go into effect in about 2 weeks. We're 2 months now. What's going on?
I mean, like I said, I have not been following along with it because there's not a whole lot to follow along with right now. This concept of selling status, residency, or whatever is not unique to this program. Lots of countries have a similar kind of pay a certain X dollar amount, you can become a resident of our country. That's not unusual. It is I don't know if it's going to replace the EB-5 investor visa but it sounds like it will, because if you have that kind of money, why would you go through the hassle of starting a business when
they've expressly stated their intention is to replace the EB-5. But the question to me is, where's the more information on this?
Yeah.
We don't have a process. We don't have a procedure.
Is it just you give $5 million, you get a green card? I don't know.
We now have, again, Howard Lutnick saying they've sold thousands of these gold cards. Who are they selling them to?
Who are they selling them to?
Where are they paying? What forms are they doing? What process is happening here?
And also, it's kind of unusual that they want to replace the investor visa, because the entire point of the investor visa is to create jobs in the United States. That's really what you're doing here. And this is just like, if you're rich enough, you can get status. It's very, like I said, like the idea itself is unusual, but their execution of it, I have no clue what's going on.
Sort of cart before the horse.
Yeah, right.
So we've seen a comment like this and variations of this across a lot of our different social media platforms, because I've talked about how there's a potential deal from the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, and ICE, and how there's going to be cooperation, particularly with the IRS sharing information over to ICE from people filing their taxes. I mean, This can be a little bit problematic, and it puts a lot of people that are in this country with status that is up in the air, puts them in a catch-22.
Right. A lot of comments, I'm just not going to file taxes. Well, if you're in the United States, that's you're earning income in the United States, that's your obligation. Right. Here with status or not, you have to file taxes. And in fact, if you ever do want to get status in the United States, you not filing your taxes, they can deny your application based on that. It goes to good moral character analysis. So it is a catch-22. Now, I don't know what the effect of this information sharing will actually be, because what people don't understand is there are a whole lot of people in the United States that are in the same situation, and there's just not enough people on the ground to go after everyone.
Absolutely.
So I would not advise you to not file your taxes, because that could have worse effects for you down the road.
For sure. When we talk about immigration, obviously everything's not black and white. I see comments like this quite a bit when we talked last time about just because you have a U.S. citizen child that reaches the age of 21 does not give everyone a pathway to residency. And in fact, most people we speak to still don't have that pathway to residency because of their immigration history.
Right. This is commonly referred to as the anchor baby in media.
The myth of the anchor baby.
The myth of the anchor baby. Just having a U.S. citizen child that's 21 does not guarantee you anything. There are exceptions to this. If you enter the country legally back in the day, then yes, a U.S. citizen child for 21 can move to adjust your status to residency in the United States. If you cross the border illegally, your U.S. citizen child by themselves will not be enough,
because they're not a qualifying relative for the waiver you're going to need.
Yeah, because it's a different if you cross the border legally, it's a different process. It's what's commonly referred to as a consular interview. You have to go to this interview will be held in your home country. Before you go to that interview and not want to spend 10 years outside the country, you have to file what's called a 601A waiver. The only sponsors of that waiver are a spouse with status or a parent with status.
Right.
So the children cannot sponsor these waivers. So
those are kind of two paths that we talk about, but then we get these comments that are saying, well, what about children in the military? And, of course there are exceptions when we're talking about that would be considered what's called a parole in place.
Right.
And then parole, meaning they are in place, they're paroling you. So it's as if you entered with a legal entry.
Right.
Or you have advanced parole and you traveled or something like that. Yes. Now we have the legal entry. Mm-hmm. You're paroled in. You have the legal entry, thereby making you eligible to adjust your status.
Right.
Not consular process.
Right.
So, of course, there's exceptions to it. I think that's important to point out.
Yeah, and there's all people generally fixate on the military parole in place, but there's a variety of paroles in place you may qualify for.
Sure.
And advanced parole is a whole separate deal. That's typically if you have TPS, you can apply for advanced parole to travel outside the country and come back. There's your legal entry. For DACA holders, they can apply for advanced parole and leave the country and come back, and legal entry. But if you don't have anything of that nature, you just cross the border here, say 20 years ago or over 20 years ago, and now your child's reached 21 years of age. That's not there's no way we can start your process, and that's always good to start your process, because it's always better to have something ongoing with immigration than nothing. But you just can't complete it unless you have that. Either you want to leave the country for 10 years or you have that sponsor for the waiver.
So we recently had a mega march here in Dallas. It's not unusual that we have protest marches. Dallas can be sometimes a hotbed of these things. This one was involving immigration, so sort of in our wheelhouse. This leads to a bigger topic, though. Every couple of years, someone will introduce a bill for immigration reform, or that's something that becomes a big topic, especially when you have Trump being reelected and now in office. Immigration is obviously at the forefront of this again, and people are pushing for this immigration reform. My thoughts are it definitely needs to happen, however unlikely to happen, because it's such a divided Congress for that to happen. What are your thoughts?
So the last major immigration reform happened in 1997. Immigration reform is kind of almost a useless term because what reform do you want to happen? I mean, like, do you want easier to get work permits? Do you want easier to get residency? There's a whole host of things you can talk about that can be reformed. So you got to kind of narrow it down as to what you want. A lot of times you hear, we want a path to citizenship. How that works now is there's no way to go from undocumented to citizen. It's
a path.
It's a path. You have to go residency, wait a certain period of time, apply for citizenship.
Sure.
Which once again usually requires knowing the English language. So if you are interested in that and getting citizenship at some point in time, my advice is start learning English if you don't know it already.
Stay out of trouble.
That's always stay out of trouble. For
everybody, citizens, non-citizens,
everyone,
stay out of trouble.
I've done a variety of different fields of law, immigration, criminal defense, stay out of trouble. The immigration reform, I agree, is unlikely, at least during this next 4-year term. For a real reform to happen, you would have to have both someone in the House and Senate introduce a bill, go through a committee, which is already divided, go to the full House or Senate chamber, and they're going to have to approve it, and then it has to go up to the president to sign off on it. It's unlikely any true immigration reform is going to happen that way, and this also goes both ways.
Sure.
I don't think any reform is going to happen that's going to benefit immigrants in the United States, but I don't think anything is going to change to make it harder for them from a reform perspective. Trump or any president can basically change rules and regulations that have already been decided on by Congress. And procedural issues, but he can't really effectuate real change in law. That's not what the president does.
You can see him kind of working on the edges with these executive orders here and there. Obviously, there's a lot of them getting swatted down in court. But again, that's what it is, working on the edges. It's not hitting at the heart of the existing immigration processes that are codified.
Right. And
he can't come in and do that.
And this goes back to our previous discussion about TPS. That is a program. It's a law passed by Congress allowing for TPS to be established, but the program itself is ran by the executive branch. That's why he can choose to not renew a TPS designation and things of that nature.
Well, we hit on a lot of topics today.
We did.
Thanks for being here. Nathan, always good to see you. See you right next door to me every day.
Every day.
But it was a fun episode, and let's do it again soon.
Right. Let's do it again.